One thing I think Trump does, I'm not sure whether the terms positive and negative work so well, but one thing that he does that I welcome is he opens the space within American political leadership for something other than what in European countries is called center-left, center-right. European countries, most of them, have multiple parties. They don't have two parties the way we do. They have 6 or 9 or 3, but they don't have 2. They haven't constricted their political space so that you're voting for Tweedledum or Tweedledee. Americans make a bigger deal than Europeans about we stand for freedom of choice, except in politics where we don't need it. 2 is more than enough. We want 15 kinds of toothpaste in the supermarket on that shelf. We want green toothpaste and toothpaste with little blue speckles in it and toothpaste that'll make your nose shine as well as your teeth. We want all that choice and all of our choice. But when it comes to politics, 2 is good. All we need is 2. 2 that are colorless copies of each other most of the time, at least in my lifetime, post-World War II. Trump blows that up. Trump says no. When Trump mocks the Bush family, Jeb Bush from Florida, who was the heir apparent when Trump begins, the Bush family dynasty, like the Kennedy, and all of this. Even the quips are interesting because you're not supposed to do that. When he mocks McCain because he was captured, I prefer prisoners of war. I prefer war heroes that aren't captured. You know what I mean? Grotesquerie, sort of. But it opens a space to not the usual oatmeal. This is something else. And so Trump makes something else possible. In that way, he functions like Bernie Sanders. And that's why they had the peculiar link between these two. I remember being struck by the number of people I encountered, just me as an individual, who said to me, I'm either going to vote for Trump or for Sanders. Those are the ones I like. I got that a lot here in New York City from working class people who were wondering which way to go. My son-in-law comes from Mississippi, a Baptist minister family in Mississippi. They also were discussing around the table Trump and Bernie. They weren't going to vote for in between. They didn't want the same old, which is how they talked about it. So Trump, like Bernie, gets a lot of points from me for opening a space. That's positive in some sense for me. And he continues to do that. I wouldn't like it the way he does it. That's crazy stuff. And he's not a serious person. I've been a professor all my life. And you learn, if you're a professor all your life, pretty quick to see which students are in there trying to learn and which are there because their parents told them, this is what you do now. And in a few years, we'll go get you a job. And you go here and get decent grades, but it's okay, you can start drinking Thursday and go through Sunday. As long as you get decent grades, the job will be there when you're done. I've learned to recognize those people, particularly when I taught at Yale, and Ivy League type places. It's very stark. You get the children of the rich who are there because that's a rite of passage. They go there. Their grandma went there, and so they go there. And those who are there because they want to learn something. Trump is the one who's there because their parents put him there. He has no interest in, he doesn't crack a book. The whole idea of doing that strikes him as stupid. He wants to get drunk, make some money, do things with young ladies, and all the rest of it. That's why he's there. And that's who he is, and that's all he's ever been. And the best description of him is the one given by Howard Stern. They understand each other. No longer, they're enemies now, but they were close friends. So for me, that's a positive breaking out of the mold. When Bernie says, I'm running for president and I'm a socialist. And when they say, oh, you're a socialist? Yeah, I'm a socialist. He doesn't walk away, as so many did. I can't tell you the number of my professors who, when you look them up historically, were socialists when they were younger, but you'd never know it. They have cleansed themselves as if that was a disease from which they had to escape. So it's refreshing and it's different in American politics. And Bernie was dismissed as hopelessly irrelevant because he was a socialist. He proved everybody wrong. And Trump, in his way, did the same. He's a clown, no one took him seriously. He's a playboy in New York who's given a lot of money by his real estate papa. All of which is true, and therefore he's irrelevant. It's all true, but he's not irrelevant. He's gonna upend the establishment of New York, all that. So for me, that's as close as this society gets to recognizing something is changing. They don't want to go there, and they want to squash it. The Democrats are squashing Bernie, and the Republicans would like to squash Trump. Not working, but they want to, and they'll keep trying. They've excluded Bernie. Look at him, he's marginalized really effectively. They haven't been able to do that to Trump yet. But they're trying. All the suits put him in jail. They're trying to sweep him out of the story of the Republican Party. So that drama is positive only because it opens a certain space. The second thing I find positive about Trump is what other people wouldn't find positive. The only I'm an economist, so I focus on that. The only significant economic things Mr. Trump tried as president were two. One was one of the biggest tax cuts in American history, the one that passed in December of 2017 into law, and the one that expires next year. And that's why they're fighting a little bit now over whether those will be extended or will end, therefore bringing those taxes back into effect. Taxes were cut, big time. That was a remarkable thing to do. In 2017, we had just completed 30 years of American history, roughly, from the 1980 to 2010, roughly. In those 30 years, we had the most dramatic redistribution of wealth in the United States in our history, from the bottom and the middle to the top. It was a boom, the likes of which you had never seen for the rich. It was the 30 years during which factories were closed here and opened in China, in which American capitalists looking for profits went to China because the profits there were better than they were here, which they still are. Wages are lower, and the market is the biggest growing market in the world. So corporations went, and if you were rich enough to own shares, the richest 10% own 80% of the shares in this country. If you were a shareholder, you cashed in on this profit boom. The rich got richer, and everybody else didn't. At no time in our history did we less need a tax cut for the rich. He gave them a tax cut for the rich. The sheer arrogance, the sheer grotesquerie of this lost. They had enough fluff and blah, 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 that this wasn't understood. I mean, some did. I don't want to overdo it. But in general, it was not understood. That was his number one economic act. And in many ways, it was successful for what he wanted. It got him the support of a large portion of the business class, which supports him now, and without which he would be gone. That's what holds him. That and the people who love guns and the white supremacists. But that's the money that supports him. The others are votes. The second of the two things he did was to wage economic war on China. One was what he called the trade war, and one was what he called the tariff war. And those are not so different, so we'll collapse them. Economic war against China. A little bit of military war, moving the fleet there, resuscitating the dead issue of Taiwan yet again. But it was mostly economics. He hit him with his big tariffs. He arrested the daughter of the executive of the Huawei Corporation when she was in Canada. And the point and purpose of it, in his language, was to make China behave reasonably, namely other than it had been. Translating that into honest English, it was to slow down their explosive economic growth because it was challenging the United States in a way that the United States has not been challenged in a century. We have not had an economic competitor in a century. The last one that was serious was the British. Their empire, we know, is gone. Hint, their empire is gone. The challengers, Japan and Germany, are wiped out in World Wars I and II. 1945, the US is it. It was already it before, but now it's it without a challenger. The Soviet Union was never an economic challenger. Even today, the United States GDP, I keep telling people things because they're so simple that hopefully they penetrate. The GDP, gross domestic product, rough number of the output of goods and services in one calendar year. The GDP of the United States is now 25, more or less, $1 trillion. The GDP of Russia is $2 trillion. You have to really work hard to make a country that's got 2 relative to your 25 appear to be a great threat like those savages were back in the, doesn't it? Doesn't it always? Anyway, the tax cut for the wealthy was successful. The tax cut for building his financial economic base as a politician was successful. And it gave a nice boost to the economy because it stimulated everybody who has got money to invest because they were floating in it. You also have to remember that when the government cuts taxes like that, it suddenly is plunged into an absurdity, which is, how in the world are you going to pay for all the things that people want you to do if you're cutting the taxes? How are you going to help college kids? How are you going to support Social Security? How are you going to make the road function? How are you going to do all the things you're expected to do if you've cut the taxes? The answer is you borrow the money. Well, there is no other answer. You could cut all the services, then you'd have a revolution here. Right here in the good old USA. They all know that. We don't discuss that, but they all know it. So they borrow the money. Here comes the good part. Who do they borrow from? Well, the mass of the American people have no money to lend to the government. So they go to the rich, who have the money. You know why they have the money to lend the money to the government? Because the government didn't tax them. Do you understand this game? This is a hustle in which rich people make themselves richer. They're the ones who lend to the government. the money that they didn't have to pay in taxes. Because for a rich person, this is a no-brainer. Which would you rather be, taxed or a creditor of the government? Oh, I'd rather be a creditor, which they are. Where else does the government get the money when it borrows? From other countries. The United States is the biggest debtor country in the world. Nobody else is close. We are in debt up to our eyeballs. But here's the best part, and your audience will enjoy this if they have a sense of humor. The second biggest creditor of the United States, the first one, Japan. Second, People's Republic of China. Who's winning and who's losing? They're the second biggest creditor. They have lent $800 billion, as of now, $800 billion to the United States. But here's what I want the American people to think about. If China owns $800 billion of US debt, which they do, then of course the United States, as the borrower, has to pay interest for the money it borrows. Which means that you and I and everybody else gets to pay taxes every year that go to Washington, where they don't fund our roads or schools or hospitals. It's money that the United States government collects and sends to Beijing to pay interest on the debt. And the Chinese use to develop the Red Army. Do you understand? All of this has to happen beneath the surface. Because if Americans understood what I just said, they would realize that beneath all the reality is the opposite. The Chinese, for their part, understand that by lending that money to the government of the United States, they are funding the American support for Ukraine, even as the Chinese are on the Russian side in that same war. You understand? That's the reality of the economic of capitalism. Now back to this Trump thing. The war against China was intended to slow its development. It failed. It was designed to get a different politics in China. It failed. In fact, everything it was designed to do, it failed. Didn't do anything. China is still growing faster than the United States, pretty much by the same margin, 2 to 3 times faster, not close. So there was a big program, and it was a bust, a 100% bust. The tragedy of Biden and of the Democrats is that they don't have the power or the commitment to do anything, even about these two things. They basically continued the anti-China economic warfare. They varied it a bit, maybe a little less intense, but pretty much the same. And they have not undone that tax cut. They promised to do it, but they haven't. And Kamala Harris suggests she will, but she wobbles, and my guess is you won't do much. There'll be a compromise, which is what they call it. Because there isn't yet, although it may materialize at any moment, the pressure that'll blow all this up. And that pressure is the gap between all the discourse over here and the bubbling reality below. That's why Mr. Trump didn't go away after his loss. That's why he didn't go away after his 47. Because the underlying pressure that produced him is still there. Nothing has been done. You know, the mass of people that are angry that their jobs are gone, or that their job security is gone, or that the prospects for their kids are gone. They're all gone. They're gone now, and they were gone 2 years ago, and they were gone 4 years ago. So Mr. Trump is in the wonderful position of saying, make believe. It hasn't gotten any better. He's right. It hasn't gotten